Welcome to Solo Sailing with Trevor White. Today I'm going to talk about sailing in the Yasawas in Fiji, and we sailed from Vuda to the Yasawas, so Vuda Marina to the Yasawas. It's a distance of about 22 miles. It's not very fast. The route from Vuda is reasonably straightforward. There's quite a bit of reef in this region, but the charts are reasonably well marked. They're relatively reliable, and that sail is a very straightforward sail. So got up early, cleared out of Vuda. Well, we sorted all of our fees and clearing from Vuda the night before, so we were ready to go. Did a last minute check, organised the boat guys, and then the interesting approach of getting out of Vuda was went through. Basically, boat guys come down, they give you a talk. A tenant boat turns up, releasing lines, pushing boats, slowly backing out, and in my case, I've got an offset prop, so I don't have a lot of room in Vuda because there was a boat anchored in the middle of the marina. So they gave me a bit of a nudge on the bow to push me around, which made it easier for me to get the boat clear of other boats and proceed to clear the channel. So yeah, relatively straightforward once you go, but everything in that place is a little different. But yeah, once we got out, fenders on board, solar panels back down into their normal position, cleared the channel without any problems. We tend to go straight out for about 200 metres, and then we get into slightly deeper water and start selecting our course. Really just put it on autopilot, sorted the sails. It wasn't a bad day. It was pretty much a easterly, and it was quite an easy sail up there. It was almost a reach. I'd say it was maybe 10-15 knots, quite light, but comfortable. And we would have been sailing at 6 or 7 knots most of the day. So we got up there around maybe lunchtime. Probably around lunchtime. And where we were heading to was a little island called Kuta Island, which is one of the southern islands in the Yasawa group. So 22 nautical mile trip. The place we were heading for was a place called Barefoot Kuta Island, which is a dive resort on Kuta Island, and they specialise in diving with bull sharks. Not my cup of tea, but something Rian wanted to do. So once we'd sort of gone past the Barefoot Resort, so I came up on the eastern side of the island, just slowly working our way in, making sure there's no uncharted reefs or obstacles. Basically tried to anchor out front of the resort, so it's quite deep, and then it comes into about 10 metres, and then very quickly it shallows out to about 6 to 3 metres, and they've got markers out to say outside of the swimming area. So the weather was okay to anchor there. Just anchoring proved to be really challenging. So at that time I had a delta on. I couldn't get a pick in. Rian even swam on the pick a couple of times, but it seemed to be hollows in an old reef filled with sand. You get your pick in, you'd reverse onto the pick, and it'd pop out. So it wasn't a great anchorage. I ended up changing over to a fisherman's anchor, and that dug in really well. So I didn't feel comfortable to leave the boat, but Rian went ashore, chatting to the dive team, had a bit of lunch, and arranged to do some diving. So that night we were going to hang there, and then the wind started coming up. Rian came back onto the boat, and we looking at staying there, but the wind came up, and it was probably 25 knots by the time she got back, and it was quickly building to 30, and I was on lee shore at this stage. It wasn't forecast, which tends to be what happens in Fiji a little bit, particularly the Yasawas. So I wanted to get out of there and move to the other side of the island, but I couldn't get the anchor up. The fishermen had dug in really, really well. So with Rian back on board, I got her on the wheel, trying to direct the boat more onto the anchor and move it to different angles, trying to get the anchor up, loosen it off, tighten it up, ended up, putting it on 4 or 5 coils on my drum, cranking it right up, and then the drum snapped. So I'd only just had this anchor rebuilt, but the drum was aluminium. It had been on there for a number of years, and I'd probably never really used it very much apart from pulling the dinghy onto the deck. But once I'd loaded it up with significant weight, it got a bit of a surge come through, lifted the boat, snapped the drum, and then there was no way I could get this anchor up unless I dove on it. The conditions are deteriorating very quickly. I needed to leave, and I either needed to dump 150 metres of 18mm road over the side, or cut the line. So I cut the line. I put a float on the end of the rope. It's just a small float. Floated it so I can come back and find it the next day. And I just simply went around the other side of the island. So I was on the northeast end of the island, just opposite the resort, and I went around to the lee, which is only about a 300 metre sail around the island, and it was in calmer conditions, but there was a lot of swell. So the reason I was on the other side initially was the swell. There's a lot of swell can come into the Yasawas, and I was experiencing significant swell. Primary anchor down, and it dug in perfectly. It was a sandy bottom, it was about 30 metres of water. It was holding really well, but conditions were absolutely terrible. We were rolling like a... And after about an hour of that, decided just to pull up the pick and move to a different anchorage. So basically, we just moved to the next island up the group. It was only about 4 miles away, and the plan was to find an anchorage up there and then come back in the morning. We're going to go diving, and then we would left Kuta Island and moved north, probably about 2.5 miles initially. And there's a bit of a bay, and where 2 islands join. So I tried to anchor in that region. It's a Yolo Bay, opposite a village, but the wind was coming between the 2 islands, and it just didn't make the anchorage work. So I went further up the island in the lee of the headland. Essentially, it wasn't too bad, but I just couldn't get a pick in. Couldn't get it to dig in anywhere. It was either way too deep, or it just wouldn't dig in. It was just rock. That was a bit challenging. It was getting dark, and I was almost thinking I might have to sail around all night. And the places where you could put an anchor in where you weren't affected by strong wind or strong swell was becoming less and less. So went all the way up into the head of the bay to the north, and the Bay School is right up in the head of the bay. So we got up in there. There's probably four catamarans actually already anchored. They'd probably been there all day. There was one spot left, so I just tossed the anchor over the side, and it held. And we just sat there between 2 reefs. We weren't really getting any strong winds, and we weren't getting any swell. So from that perspective, it was a good anchorage. And the intention was to hang there overnight, go back in the morning, and if the conditions improved, and then work out some boat dives at the resort. So I didn't get to dive in the anchor because it was quite dirty in the bay. Did a bit of snorkeling a bit further away, but again the conditions weren't suitable for snorkeling at that time. So we just had a bit of dinner, settled down, anchor watch on, hoping the anchor was down solid, which it appeared to be. And the conditions, blew pretty solid all night, probably about 25 to 30 knots. But we were in a relatively safe spot. But if we did drag, we didn't have a lot of time. So I kept the anchor watch on, kept the boat ready to go if I needed to, if we did drag. But we held comfortably. The next morning, it was still blowing pretty hard, so we just hung there during the day. And the following day, conditions had improved back down to the resort, and we just worked out what dives that Rianne wanted to do. So down at Barefoot, they catered to the dives that she wanted. So she did a couple of different dives. Did one dive with more locally on the island, and then the dive she really wanted to do was the bull sharks. So again, conditions there were a bit challenging. Like the day we went back down for the dive, anchored on the west side, so it was affected by swell, but it wasn't too bad. So I just stayed on the boat, took her ashore in the dinghy. She went and did some dives, and then later in the day they brought her back around in the dive tender, which was great. It saved me going into the beach, because the beach was a bit dodgy. There's a lot of coral on that little beach. It was a good anchorage. in good conditions, but we weren't experiencing good conditions. We had a lot of swell, and the waves were rolling through that little bay. There's a lot of coral in that bay, so it was actually a nice spot to snorkel. I did a bit of snorkeling in there, and it would have been easy enough just to put the dinghy in the water, go around the headland, and drop off at the boat. But she decided she initially just to walk in, and then when the dinghy, that dive tender brought her back. But the conditions there weren't really suitable for sleeping. It was pretty rolly, so decided to move again, and then in the morning I'd either bring her down in the dinghy or bring her down in the yacht. But as we motored back up in the bay, and this time we decided with the conditions changing more to a southerly wind, still a bit of a swell, that we would probably anchor in the Yolo Bay again, but a lot closer to the village. So just as you come into the bay, on the southern part of the island, there's a small village near the where the two islands join. You can't actually drive or motor through there on a boat unless you've got a very shallow draft. It sort of gets washed there. But I came in and anchored in about 7 metres of water. It was perfect. I was protected from the swell. I was protected from the wind. I was far enough off the beach that I didn't have to worry if the wind swung up. The only concern for me would be if the wind came around to the east again, I would have to move, because it was open to that open to that easterly wind coming through between the islands and creating havoc for me. But you've got to go somewhere, and I went there, and then we talked to the resort on the phone and asked if it was possible to be picked up with a dive tender in the morning. Because if it wasn't that, it was either we get up early, motor down there in the yacht, or in the dinghy. It was only 2.5 miles away, but it's still a fair dinghy ride, especially if you're you're moving into a southerly. And it was pretty choppy. They agreed to pick her up in the morning in the dive tender, which is fantastic, because in the morning it was still blowing its ass off, and in the dive tender they were moving quickly enough to stay on top of the wash and the chop, but my smaller rib would have just been soaked. So we had a good night that night. Just had a bit of barbecue on the back deck, and anchor held really well there. It was a good position. If I had had more time there, I would have liked to have gone into the village and met the locals. But I just needed to find somewhere safe to anchor. In the morning, the boys were there at about 7 o'clock, I think. Picked up Rianne, and she went off diving with the bull sharks. And I just did a few boat jobs, just boat jobs around the boat, sorting things out, planning the next phase of the where we were going to go. So we still had a southerly blowing, probably a bit more southeasterly than true south. Winds were sort of moving around quite a lot. There's still a lot of swell, but the swell had eased off, thankfully. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to stay in the position I was in. And we thought, once Rianne came back from the dives, we might head up into the head of the bay and try and stay there for a few days and check it out. Go ashore, meet the village. It looked like a really beautiful spot. But once she came back, picked up the pick, motored up into the head of the bay, and it was terrible. Like, the wind was rolling through, the swell was wrapping around in the bay now. It was just a very uncomfortable place, and the only place I could have gone was back down to where I'd just come from. And I decided, it was time to leave, and I was going to head to the north of Waya Island. There was a big bay up there which would have been protected from the conditions, and I'd anchor up there. So because we was moving now or the wind was blowing in a southeasterly, probably south-southeast, I decided to choose the eastern side of, the western side of the island to motor up. But that was quite a challenge getting out there. It was really choppy initially, just getting around a couple of little reefs, and then there's a passage between an outer reef and the island. And once we got onto that passage, it was quite calm. We were sort of protected from the islands. Became pleasant. Just ran a head sail, sailed down. Just sailed down with a nice breeze, easy conditions, and we sailed past the octopus resort. So I hadn't really even known it was there, but it looked like a great little bay. Conditions were perfect for anchoring out there. There was still a bit of swell rolling through, but we had a beautiful sunny day, calm conditions because the wind was blowing on the other side of the island, so we're in the lee. water was crystal clear, and we just picked our way in there between a couple of reefs. Got into about 6-7 metres of water, sandy bottom. Tossed the pick over the side. Anchored really easily. Could see the anchor in the water, and we just hung there for a couple of hours, and then decided we'd go in and have a drink and have dinner. It was just picture postcard perfect. So that was probably the first pleasant anchorage we'd had in the Yasawas, which was stress-free. So stayed there for a couple of days. Octopus Resort, the food was good. It was a bit different. It was like a set menu, like 5 different dishes. It was a bit on the expensive side for sailing. I think it was probably about $120, $140 per person a head, which I thought was a bit rich for what we were getting, but it's a resort on an island. Drinks were okay. They were normal sort of price, about $10 a drink. But the location was beautiful. Had nice deck. Had an interesting mix of people, from luxury to almost backpacker it seemed. So we spent a couple of days just there, and Rian went ashore, just did some work in the resort. On the computer at the bar, and I just did some work around the boat, sorting things out. And from there we decided we'd move further up into the Yasawas. So there's no really diving at this resort. Well, there probably was, but not the type of diving we wanted. It was a little bit more vanilla diving, taking people that didn't do a lot of diving just out onto basic reefs. But the next bay up, we were going to be, the next island up rather, we were going to be diving with Manta Rays. So that was on the bucket list. Early in the morning, we picked up it's not early, it was 8 o'clock in the morning, and we headed north. The plan was to head to the Manta Ray resort area, and there's two resorts up there. There's Manta Ray Island Resort and the Barefoot Manta Island Resort. We thought we'd anchor near one of them, find some protection. It was a subtly blowing, or sort of southeasterly blowing. And once we got around the corner from Octopus, we felt that, and we were getting like a fair 25-30 knot wind coming through. It was quite choppy. It was uncomfortable. It was rolling. Rian was feeling quite unwell on the passage, but it was only a 7 to 10 nautical mile passage, so it wasn't very long. And you just had to suck it up for a few hours. It was a little bit slow going, for us, and I'm on a couple of cats whizzed past us, but that's life. It was really just motor sailing the whole way. Once we got up to the vicinity, the Manta Ray Island Resort, the island itself created a lee for us, and conditions calmed down a lot. It was glassy again. And then we just needed to pick our way in through the reefs. You got to be a little bit careful. Read the charts clearly. It is easy to drive over a reef if you're not paying attention. And in those crappy conditions, it can be very easy to make a mistake. So we picked our way in, and we ended up we're looking around the Manta Ray, but the wind was blowing straight up through that passage. It was quite uncomfortable and choppy in there. Initially, I thought that's where I'd anchor, and then anchoring on the lee of that island, and I was on the western side in a little bay. It was a tiny little bay, just enough room for one boat. But I dropped the pick in there in about 12 metres of water. Perfect swing room for one boat in all wind directions, and it was really good holding. So we got in there, and it was still blowing 25, so dug the pick well in, put out plenty of scope, dropped my anchor buddy over the side to give the anchor a little bit more purchase, and then we just chilled out there for the day, did a bit of snorkeling around the area. Like the coral is quite nice through there. It's an area where people from Manta Ray Resort either walk over the island and swim in that bay, or they come around in the boat and either do night dives or night snorkels, or morning snorkels. So it was a nice spot to anchor. Had a look up at the area where most boats anchor, which is the near the Barefoot Resort, and it's not a big anchorage. It's quite deep, and it had 13 boats in there already. So there was no way we were going to get in there. Any moorings were already taken. Anything left was in 25 probably metres of water, I reckon. It was quite deep, what was available, and there just wasn't enough swing room. So I decided to stay away from all of those boats and just have a bit of peace of mind, because when I looked in there was just boats going everywhere, like swinging into each other's. The currents were pushing some boats in one direction, the wind in the other. It was a reasonably untidy place to be in a boat. And I felt my little anchorage, where it was too small for another boat to anchor, was a good spot. So I had a few boats sniff around trying to work out where they could anchor next to me, give me a little hug. But no, they couldn't. So they all toddled off to somewhere else. But yeah, first night we had a really good sleep there. It was well protected. There wasn't a lot of swell the first night. The next day, the wind changed again. We got more and more swell building. Went for a bit of a dinghy over to Manta Pass, and we were hoping to see some mantas. We didn't get to see any. The visibility wasn't that great. Conditions weren't that great. It was quite windy. There's a lot of people, so a little frustrating. But yeah, that's the reality of cruising season. There's a lot of boats all trying to do the same thing, and if you're there when the Arc Rally comes through, it makes it even worse, or one of the big rallies. But at that stage, the wind continued to deteriorate, and we were getting probably 33, 35 knots. The wind, the swell also was getting worse, and we had 2 days of the worst weather I think I've ever had in an anchorage. Swell was just horrific. Couldn't go anywhere else. We were trying to see the mantas, and I'd say on the second day we both had a gutful, and it was time to leave. I couldn't stay in that anchorage longer. It was driving me insane. And I just couldn't work out any other place to go. The wind was either blowing into the potential anchorages, or the swell was wrapping around and making them just very uncomfortable. So we got the pickup, and we said goodbye to Manta and headed south. So we went back down to our previous island, but went into the Northern Bay. And that was just beautiful. Way Island again, and the Northern Bay in the right conditions is just spectacular. So we went in there. We were the only boat in there anchoring. There's quite a few boats that just left, and they'd gone to where we just left. So good luck to them. But I anchored in a sandy bottom, dark sort of mineral sands, 6 metres of water, crystal clear, off a little village. No one was really bothering us, and we didn't feel like going and talking to the village. We didn't feel like walking across to Octopus, which is on the other side of the headland. We just wanted to chill out and get over the last couple of days of this terrible anchorage. Stayed there for a couple of days. I jumped over and used the opportunity to clean the hull. The water was just beautiful. Temperature was fantastic. It was just a nice spot to do those crappy jobs. So I spent a few days there, just chilling out, and then decided to sail back to Nadi. So Rianne was heading back to Europe, back to Holland, and we need to get down there, give it a couple of days so we could get in, sort everything out, make sure we had plenty of time for flights, etc. But on the way we decided that we'd go to Latuka again, so we and just do some grocery shopping for my trip back to New Zealand. So we left. I don't know, probably left 6 in the morning and went down the eastern side of the island this time, back towards Nadi. There's almost no wind. It was a bit sloppy. We were sort of a bit swell around, just motoring initially, and then the wind came in, 10, 20 knots initially. So just a nice reach, cruising down the island. It's quite a scenic island to sail down on the eastern side. There was, we're sailing on the outside of where we'd been anchored in the inner bays, sailing down past Barefoot again, and as we were going past Barefoot, there's a number of small dive boats come zipping out past us, and they were heading off to do the bull shark dive. So that was between the island and Latuka. So we just watched them heading out to the reefs where they were running that dive. But the wind dropped off probably at about 10 knots, and it was just a really easy sail all the way down into Latuka, anchored at the front of Banaka Island Resort. I think we anchored in probably 10 metres this time. There was very few boats there versus last time there's quite a few. It's a mud bottom, so it's a bit of a dirty spot. The water's quite dirty. Depending on which way the wind's blowing, the anchorage can be be a bit polluted as well. But it was quite a nice day, like everything was sort of working in our favour that day. Dropped the pick, went into town just to get some supplies, went to the local little restaurant there, bought a heap of groceries, some booze, and then we went to the Bananka Island Resort restaurant that night. Again, it was a nice feed. It was quiet. I think there was only one other couple in the restaurant besides us. And I'd go there again. I thought it was a good little spot. Back to the boat and just chilled out there for 2 days. We decided to stay an extra day because it was just really cruisy there. So if you're in the area and you're going past Latuka, it's definitely a consideration. Like, it gets a bad rap because of the some of the pollution, but if you get the right winds, it's an easy anchorage. Access to town is easy. You just have that little creek where you take your boat up. There's someone keeping an eye on it. They often try and charge you like $10 Fijian to have your boat there, but it's a small price to pay for someone to keep an eye on things. But it's literally a 100-metre walk from the boat ramp to the main supermarket. Another 50 metres to a really large bottle shop. Another 50 metres to McDonald's, and then 500 metres into town. So I thought it was a great spot just to get supplies. So once we'd spent a couple of days just bumming around Latuka, went to the restaurant again. It was nice to be in an anchorage where it wasn't rolly, it wasn't blowing its ass off, the swell wasn't just terrible. We decided to head back into Vuda, and that's where I'd be clearing customs from. Needed to sort some issues with leaving the boat and catching a flight, so that was all easy to sort out in Vuda, where they're used to boats doing those things. But we went down, I think it's only 5 miles, maybe 6 miles down to Vuda from Latuka. Got offshore, called them up. We just waited till they said, called us in. I think I waited for probably about an hour, just drifted out the front, waiting for our turn to go in. Only problem was it was a falling tide, so I had to give them a hurry up a couple of times. I didn't want to be on the bottom of the tide going in. So we still had a metre under the keel as we went in on a falling tide. But we got in there. The berth we had was not fantastic. We were next to a massive big stink boat. It's probably about a 55-foot straight-sided thing, so it wasn't good for a yacht to be next to one of those. We all seemed to roll a slightly different motion, putting out fenders everywhere. That's life. And we got in there, got tied up, went to the pub. And that was pretty much our trip. I would say the Yasawas, you want to pick a weather window where the swells are down and the winds are not too ferocious, but it's difficult to go to the Yasawas and not have high winds. If you're going there, you really need to expect to have, at times, terrible conditions, really bad swell, strong winds, sometimes a little warning, and they almost come through as like little storm cells. Very difficult to forecast on some of the weather apps. I almost say they're useless in the Yasawas. They can give you, information on the bigger systems, but the Yasawas seems to be a little more isolated in its weather, and the swell wraps around there very, very. Have a good think when you're planning your Yasawas trip. It's got some beautiful diving. The resorts are amazingly beautiful. People are fantastic. All of those wonderful Fijian aspects, but the weather for a boat can be absolute garbage. And even talking to the guys on catamarans, they're going, oh man, I can't handle this anymore. I'm just, rolling from side to side. And like they're a catamaran, or 45-foot catamarans rolling from side to side, and they're bitching. Imagine how hard it is for a monohull. And I'm, a heavy monohull, so I'm, 12, 14 ton, fully laden. I tend to sit pretty well in the water. Got a modified, fairly large keel. So I don't roll too bad, but like we were almost slapping the water. That's how it felt. It was that bad. The people in small boats, like light racer cruisers or light 30-footers, they were just getting beaten up. Their boats were just rolling so violently. It was ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. It would have been horrific to be on board those boats. Would have been better off taking a sleeping bag and going and sleep on the beach. Almost thought about doing it myself. But that is life on a cruising boat. Some days in some places it's absolutely glorious. Other times you're just getting your ass kicked. On this occasion, it wasn't so pleasant. Would I go back? That's a difficult question. I think I'd need to look at the weather and plan a different month. I was there September, October region time. It was windy, and it was windy. Vuda to the Yasawas, diving with bull sharks at the Barefoot Resort, which is pretty awesome. Anchoring at Octopus and going to the Octopus Resort was pretty cool. And visiting a few of the other resorts. They're all great resorts. They all offer something a little different. The Manta Bay or Manta Pass, where you see the mantas, it's hit and miss. So if you're there for a week, you're probably going to see them at the right time of year. We were there for a few days. We didn't get to see them, but the visibility was terrible, and the conditions for us were terrible. So thanks for joining me, and safe sailing, and I'll chat to you next time.